Hello and welcome friends to House of Props. This week I 3D printed this full-size RT-97C blaster. No foam, no kits, just a full 3D printed prop from start to finish. Let's head to the shop, get started, and I'll show you the process. I had all three of my printers going to speed up the process. Since this blaster is so highly detailed, there were a lot of components to print. I've listed the print settings below. The only thing that really changed depending on the file was the use of supports and the layer height. For a lot of the body pieces, I used a layer height of 0.2, and for the small greebles, I used 0.08 to ensure detail accuracy. So here the body pieces are printed, and while the various scopes print, I'm going to go ahead and assemble these together. But first I want to remove the visible layer lines, and I'm starting with a 220 grit pad on my sander. Sanding against the grain gives the best results I have found, and you'll notice how with this simple one pass, the line visibility has diminished significantly, and all the pieces get a pass with the sander. Then I like to take a loose piece of the 220 and hit areas by hand where the sander wasn't able to reach. I'm going to start assembly with the body 1 and 2.1 pieces. These will get aligned like so, and the grip will get inserted into this opening. To attach, I'm using CA glue, and I'm applying a decent amount of the glue to the flat surface of body 1. Then body 2.1 is aligned. Once I'm happy with its placement, I cure the glue instantly with Zip Kicker. This way I can speed up the build process. The grip gets inserted to the bottom, and again I'm using CA glue. I'm making sure the grip sits snugly and evenly into body 1. This is where the grip gets most of its support. Where it rests in body 2.1 is only supported on the sides, which is why I placed the glue there. While I continue with the alignment, I would really appreciate it if you would click the subscribe button if you haven't already. It's completely free to you and will help my channel grow. Plus, if you click the notification bell, you can customize your notifications so you'll never miss a project. Thank you! With the body pieces attached, the chariot can slide into 2.1 just like this. This piece will remain unglued, so it will be movable in the end. The charging handle can be glued into its hole on the chariot. Now, to start the barrel, I begin with the muzzle and barrel 1. The muzzle piece sits snugly into the sight end of the muzzle like so. Now, for the support in the blaster, I'm using a 30.5 inch long piece of 1/2 inch dowel. This can be inserted through barrel 1 and rest in the muzzle. Don't forget to add glue into the hole like I almost did. Then barrel 2 can be slid on, and before pressing the barrel pieces together, add some glue to the seam. Take the time to make sure the pieces are aligned before curing the glue. This will help later on by reducing the amount of seam cleanup needed. Barrel 3 has been added, and barrel start 1 will attach to the rear like so. Just make sure this top sight support is in line with the sight on the muzzle. Then barrel start 2 gets glued on here. This flat area needs to be in alignment with the sight supports as well. Now this piece is body 2.2 and slides onto the rear of the dowel and is glued so the flat surface is in line with the other top pieces. Then this entire barrel unit slides into the body like so and is glued in place. The sight is glued onto the flat surface on body 2.2 so that this vertical piece is on the left side of the blaster. And the body hose attachment gets inserted into this hole on the side like so. 2 muzzle bars are printed, and one gets glued on each side of the muzzle so that the end with 1 rivet sits on the muzzle and the side with 2 rivets sits on the sight ring. The magazine is glued together in one unit, and this unit gets glued onto this area of the barrel start. It's positioned so the side with the circle details will be facing the user. On top of the magazine, the strap brackets get attached opposite each other on a diagonal line. The scope with the hoses mount gets glued onto body 2.1 just here. Okay, so there are a couple seams I need to address before moving forward. 2 on the barrel, 1 between the barrel start pieces, and 1 on the body. And to fill those, I'm using some glazing and spot putty. This can usually be found in the automotive area of stores, and I'm applying it with a palette knife, and I'm really pressing it into the seams and keeping the application thick, because this putty does shrink as it dries and can sink into seams, making them visible again. While I'm waiting for the putty to dry, I'll attach the pieces to make the 3 scopes. First up is the scope with the hose. Part 2 gets glue around this ring, which in turn slips into part 1 like so. The hose attachment greebly gets glued into the larger hole, and the screw insert into the small one. Next up is the mounted scope. Parts 1 and 2 get glued to each other, but before gluing, you want to make sure the dial case is slid onto part 2, then the scope pieces can be glued and set. Then the case can be slid into the correct location and glued down to keep it from spinning. Next, the scope mount gets attached to the bottom of part 1 right here. Then the scope fasteners get glued to the top like so. Next, the scope dials get mounted to each flat surface on the scope case. The mount bar can be glued into the 2 indents on the scope mount, and the 2 mount dials get glued on the reverse side right here. This lens ring will get glued into the end here, but that will happen after I've painted and made the lenses, but for right now I'll set it off to the side. The third scope gets some pieces set aside as well. These 2 mount screws and this tip piece. I actually had my friend print this in clear PETG, so it'll have some transparency at the final stage. The scope base has a center nub, and this will be the top of the scope. The 2 mount bases get glued onto the scope base in these 2 locations. Then the 2 fasteners get glued on top of those. This target ring is inserted and glued into this end like this. And a 1-inch piece of 1/8-inch dowel can be glued into the center hole on the ring. This end will eventually receive the tip, but not yet. The dials get glued onto the other 2 nubs on the scope's base surface. So now the putty has dried, I mix some of the putty with some acetone and use an old brush to brush the mixture onto the surface of the blaster and the scopes. This mixture will help fill in any fine lines left behind, or areas where the sanding wasn't able to reach. Once that is all dry, I sand it down with the 220 grit. This will even off the brush marks, and you'll notice how it's staying behind, filling in some uneven areas. This makes a mess, which is why I've laid down a scrap piece of paper. Okay, everything's sanded and it's time to prime. I've always liked to use this 2-in-1 primer because it's not only just a primer, but it helps fill in any unevenness, and it can be sanded to get a really clean finish. After the primer has dried, I'm wet sanding it with some 400 grit. This will give a nice silky smooth surface and remove any hint of unevenness in the primer application. The pieces are sanded and smooth to the touch, so now it's time to spray them with a matte black. I'm going to spray 3 thin even layers and wait 30 minutes between layers. By keeping them thin, I can avoid drips and runs and get a clean application. Once the spray is dry, I take some black acrylic and pounce this onto the surface. Pouncing like this hides brush marks, and it leaves behind this amazing cast metal texture. On body 1 and 2.1, I pounce a medium brown. The same brown can be applied to the grip, but here I'm going to have the brush marks help create a wood grain. The scopes get some brass detailing, and I found an antique gold to be an excellent substitute for brass. I apply it to areas of the scope with the hose and areas of the mounted scope. Areas of the blaster and the scopes need to look like the metallic base is showing through the black because of all the dust and sand in the air. So I'm taking a metallic nickel, brush it on an area, and then use a soft cloth to dab, pounce, and blend the paint so it becomes very subtle. Once the metallics are dry, I apply some liquid latex to act as a masking fluid, and once the latex is dry, some of the black can be pounced over and around the metallic areas. While I wait for that to dry, I go ahead and pounce some burnt umber onto the medium brown. They look pretty similar, but the umber is darker, and by keeping coverage sporadic, it'll create some nice subtle variation. I repeat the same process I used with the nickel on the scopes to the rest of the body of the blaster, trying to keep it random and uneven so it looks more natural and not handmade. Using some of the black thinned with water, I add some into the recesses and corners of the grip and the brown body area, and then wipe away the excess to leave behind some aging in these areas. So remember this tip piece? I've sanded it to remove the print lines and polished it by wet sanding. It looks a little dull, so I'll spray it with a gloss clear coat to brighten it up again and bring back some transparency. The latex and black have dried, and the latex can be peeled away and it leaves behind an amazing chipping effect. Like, this stuff works great. You'll notice some areas I have left the spray matte black show. This is to create some variations so everything doesn't look flat by being the same finish. And the dowel in the single point scope gets painted a bright red. This scope gets some tubing inserted into it, and for that I'm using 7 inches of a 1/4 inch tube. It's already black, so I'm dry brushing some of the tin onto it to make it look like the rest of the blaster. Next, I want to add a little bit of shine to the brown areas, so I'm going to spray those with this matte clear. Even though it's matte, it does still have a little bit of a shine to it, and it'll also protect the grip paint from rubbing off when handled. To create the lenses, I 3D printed their shapes, and I'm going to use this small vacuum form, which is meant for candy and soap mold making, but it works great for projects like this as well. Once the 0.02 PETG sheet has reached the right temperature, I turn on the vacuum and lower the sheet onto the bed where it is pulled tightly around the 3D printed shapes, leaving behind these nice clear lenses. I trim them out and glue them into the ends of the scopes with CA glue. Remember this lens ring from the mounted scope? Its lens gets glued onto the inner circle, and then the whole thing gets inserted into the scope. And the tip can be glued onto the single point scope. The mounted scope sits into the sight support on barrel start 1, the scope with the hose sits onto its support bracket on the right side of the body, and the single point scope gets attached into the bar on the left side of the body. The tube can be glued into the scope and into the body like this. When placing the mounted scope, make sure it is in line with the barrel. The single point scope slides on like this, and the mount screws I had set aside are attached to the underside to clamp it into place. And there it is, a finished, highly detailed RT-97C blaster. This project had a lot of pieces because there is so much detail, but all that printing time is worth it in the end. By adding in the brass and nickel colors, it helps break up the surface and give the blaster more visual interest, and it lets your eye focus on the mini greebles and not blend it all together. I have to say, I'm really happy with this project. Yes, it took some time to build, but by taking my time on every detail, it has led to an amazing, accurate replica for any collection or trooper cosplay. If you'd like to make your own RT-97C, a link can be found in the description. Let me know what you think of this blaster and which one I should make next. Please give this vid a thumbs up, share it with all your friends and family, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day. And remember, if you are building any of my builds or using any of my templates, feel free and tag me at Haas of Props on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, because I would really like to see your fantastic work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.